This lecture was delivered during the time of the presidential sex scandal in the late 1990s. As such, it begins within the context of an inferred backdrop of the sexual behavior of others. It progresses to an overall look at blaming and the vicissitudes of personal morality in general. Some commentary on children as our wards is given as well. Ethics is given as personal restraint against the condemnation of others. We begin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Toward Equality of Life. Our topic today is morality. We are policing you. To begin, I am looking for a moral language, said the late, young, and great filmmaker Werner Fassbinder of Germany. There was morality right there in the intellectual search for something true, something to hold on to, something to feel, and something that could be the way of meaning in a world void of possibility to a meaning for existence. This is the angst. This is the wisdom. This is the uncontrollable suffering for truth, meaning, and higher order reality. It is not to be found in the mundane and petty, the superficially judgmental, or the profoundly judgmental, or any judgmental, or the fire and brimstone terrorizing the child of the soul. The ethic is evolved through life in a ball of confusion and cohesion, through a lot of moral and psychological pain. The ethic regarding personal matters, and what could be more personal than sex or personal life? The ethic is that every person is responsible for him or herself. In a world without glory, a world without heart, a world without justice, a world of sure uncertainty, even despair. This is the struggle of our time. This is the struggle in part for our ages immemorial. We are only partially moral beings to the greatest extent, with potential. Here's the rub. It is the potential against hate, unfairness, and loneliness that keep us going or dying. True morality requires a discipline, goodness, derived from agony. It won't do to have a concrete operation of a kind of thing one calls a morality, which is merely who stole the cookies from the cookie jar and oh my goodness, I'm going to get scolded. I only know it's wrong because it's been punished in the past or it's against the law. more of a morality of who helped a stranger on the side of the road. No matter who that stranger is or was, who felt compassion, no matter who that stranger is or was, how he or she was dressed, where he or she stood in life, who had goodness of heart. True morality requires a consciousness of the paradox and illusions of life as it appears to be. And where what appears to be can fool us every time. I repeat, I have said in past meetings with you, there is an expression, the reference of it, I do not know. It was told to me once by a professor. And the expression is, the snark was a Boojum. What it really is not what it's made out to be. Deeper morality cannot satisfy, let alone even begin to entertain itself with who's zooming home. Primary and secondary gain. Newsy neighbors. Hierarchical lines of pretense, power, prestige, authority, begrudging, and the busying of oneself on the personal. That is sexual business of others. Even to cause their demise, not because of justice, but because of spite. Spite. What is spite? Malice, wishing of injury, hatred, and trying to humiliate. Oh, how we love to punish, to humiliate for so long a time in our history. This deeper morality, or this concept existentially, was the refrain of a Billie Holiday when she sang, "Ain't nobody's business if I do." It is the uncompromising demand of salt and pepper when they say, "If I want to take a guy home with me tonight, none of your business." The first examination, the moral examination, is that of ourselves. Not even of our children. Not to look outward, a human predilection. People may behave in ways we deem unacceptable for our own personal lives. But that is their personal lives, not ours. And oh, how the pots call the kettles black. Oh, how we holier than thous strive to impose, inflict, insist, coerce judgments regarding personally expropriated concepts of propriety, mistakenly labeled morality, mistakenly labeled right versus wrong, good versus bad, outside the secular law, onto persons other than ourselves, even when as human beings we cannot be paragons of perfection. More importantly, and more appropriately considered, when we insist to impose on others and do not ferret malice, coercion, jealousy, arrogant condemnation, and ill will from personal motivation. Today, not even many parents have so-called moral authority over their children, especially when they either lend examples of themselves unworthy of respect, like screaming, slapping, hollering, unkindness, and selfishness on their own behalf. Why have the children? And kids are fighting back. Or parents are too little available to experientially become moral or authoritative example by either functionally not being around for all it's worth, or by entering a life only to give orders and direction, a hollow and highly disfavored positioning among the nation's youth. Times change. Whole moods change. Whole circumstances change. Zeitgeist, ethics, morality are in a constant state of change. And thank goodness. For Lord knows, we live in the most brutal, imperfect, and unfair world for time immemorial. It is not like when you and I were growing up. It will not be like before in the current future as we know it. People, history, throw off the shackles of previous prejudices and barbarisms as time moves on. As people learn to fight, as light peeps through a crack of the deep, dark hole. As awareness and courage and conditionings grow, as hope springs eternal, alongside increasing suicide in a less physically hostile world, but a scathingly lonely one. As contingencies force consideration and adaptation to both betterment and to the creation of new shackles along the way. And what do we mean by this word contingency, which we have used on several occasions as well? A contingency is technically a conditional event to which behavior is incidental or upon which behavior is dependent. So what contingencies mean, following this definition, is that those circumstances, those interpersonal, physical, physiological, psychological, environmental, behaviorally environmental events that inflict upon us or occasion us to behave in certain sorts of ways are continually affecting the outcome of who we are, what we think, what we do, how we act, how we feel. For example, television. The images of horrific physical strife and malicious design of one person against another and very gory detail would be contingencies affecting our general state of being. As well, the speed with which images are delivered on television would be a kind of contingency affecting the behavioral outcome. So that perhaps even our children who watch video images that come at increasingly rapid speeds can be being conditioned to kinds of deficit disorders of attention by virtue of the speed with which images are being delivered, to say the least of the speed with which life is being lived. Contingencies of daycare and the kinds of interpersonal behavioral events that occur either by happening or being absent from happening, affecting the outcome of who we are as people. The availability of sustenance and contact comfort and the understanding true rapport of an intertwined, ongoing, deeper and deeper commitment of experience between human individuals or the lack thereof, having a contingent effect on the outcome of behavior. The incorporation of each of us, of other persons, into us, under our skin, into our being, or the lack thereof. We could go on and on with what we mean by contingencies, but the contingencies are there for us to control, and the contingencies are bearing down on our behavior 29 hours a day, including the contingencies of how we feel about what is being said and done and lived and understood or thought to be understood of as the concept of morality. Now back to people throwing off shackles of prejudices, creating new ones in turn as history moves on. History even reverses itself from bad to better to worse. It does not move forward in lockstep progression. And we go to war, and we lynch people, and we treat each other with disrespect over matters not personal to the lives we have to justify, the lives we have to live and be responsible for. We are moving so fast. We are facing questions and psychology we mostly did not imagine. We are in the future now. We are torn asunder on a fast, furious, curious planet. We can barely afford or desire an honest examination of ourselves. Perennially in denial, we are numb. Sophisticated, numb skulls. we sure the hell cannot determine how the next guy has got to live in his or her personal life, or whether he or she can lie about it. Family values. What family values? What value? What family? Members dispersed, parents away from children, grandparents away from children, grandparents in nursing homes, brothers and sisters off around the world, parents not providing the bulk of primary care to their children, even by default of being in the same environment for most of their growing children's experience. Children on their own. Babies on their own. We will not be returning to mutual shared experience over many hours of many days and many years of first-hand coexistence with each other as a family in any site we can set. That enactment for family is vastly reduced. We are animals constructing, and I mean animals as in biological animals, constructing ourselves to keep moving on from, quote, networks, unquote, to, quote, contacts, unquote, to, quote, get a life, unquote, to, quote, move on with one's life, unquote. In this way, I am a traditionalist because I neither like this nor favor this change. But I do not fight it, for I must move in step or fall by the wayside or even die. We are media pawns and personalities. Hamburger for the machine of money and the machine of dominion. We do ourselves a disservice when we parrot what has and what will continue to have a very hard time being. Nuclear family. And the value system of training and sponsorship that resulted from it. We are not only the shape of things to come. We are the shape of things transpiring and changing and challenging. The ironies, the hypocrisies, the age-old inclinations to greed, power, denial of one's own imperfections, but blaming of another's. And ends which satisfy the few over the many. Ends which deep down, in truth, do not grope for justice, beauty, or compassion, or love, brotherly love. There is never a reason to be disrespectful to another human being, or to an animal, or to violate inalienable rights to privacy, personal territory, that is, some space for each person to call his or her own personal space, and due process. There is never, ever a reason to be disrespectful to another human being, or to an animal, or to violate inalienable rights to privacy, personal territory, and due process, which means, according to the fair, consensually agreed on, technically agreed on processes to establish validity and truth. Morally, there is never a reason to be malicious, spiteful, or to connive, or to be treacherous. This is morality. Morally, we cannot wish harm to befall another creature. Our hearts must be pure. This is very difficult. I dare any of us to stand and say before the world that our hearts are pure in all truth, in all earnest, for such is our human condition. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. People who live in glass houses should not throw stones. We who are silent, the majority, are not uncaring slobs. We are not willing to condemn. We have some sense of the hard lessons of history and the hypocrisy of the Scarlet Letter. Now, you will recall the Scarlet Letter was a novel written by, I believe, Nathaniel Hawthorne. And the gist of the story, to paraphrase, is something to the effect that in a small Puritan-like village, a woman becomes pregnant out of wedlock. The irony and true-to-life circumstance, as has often been the case, is that the person becomes pregnant to boot with a minister or a preacher or a person of the clergy. The person of the clergy does not come forward with this information. The woman is effectively or functionally tried and convicted of being a bad person, of being a sinner, and she must wear a scarlet letter. While the clergy person goes free, and she is meant to feel the reproach and the condemnation and the heaping of shame on her by that human community. The heaping of shame, the humiliation, the condemnation, the judgment. The way people are made to walk like dogs, the oppression, for matters of personal life and personal behavior. That is the scarlet letter. But we have some sense of the hard lessons of history and the hypocrisy of the scarlet letter. That what meets the eye, as I said before, is not what it seems to be. And that history moves ever so slowly for us to see things in a clearer light, in a more objective and less condemning light, in a more compassionate, not forgiving, not excusing, but compassionate, human form of light. For what do we live if not to learn these painful lessons? What other reason would we be going through hell on earth if not to learn these painful lessons? Yes, we the quiet do not like what we see, and we feel we should have sense enough to leave it alone and to be left alone, to not dictate and to not be dictated to see the soiled hands under the white gloves, and know the smell of ordinary sweat and excrement from anybody who lives. This is a value. This is an ethic. Not the shame and humiliation, not the scarlet letter. And this value is faced with fear, uncertainty, and anguish as any good principle, vague and evolving or concrete, could be. It is an ethic that the principle be vague. That in and of itself is an ethic. That we do not want our ethics scripted in stone. We do not want our pathway and journey to higher order consciousness written for us to alleviate us of having to go through the personal trials and tribulations, suffering of arriving at what can only be truth for ourselves, which eventually will be truth for everyone, but which will not show its face as some easy, supercilious, and superficial code, so to speak, of ethics. It is an ethic that the principle be vague. For woe to ye who are ready, willing, and able to condemn. Not because hell awaits, not because you fear you may go to the underworld, afterlife, not because your hand was slapped when you stole a cookie from the cookie jar, but because to condemn is possibly not a moral prerogative. Our goodness precludes us from policing conduct and business which is personal. Conduct and business which is not ours. Conduct and business which is prevalent, sadly, as life itself. Not accepting without question. I repeat, to not accept without question. This is a value. This is a proposition. All that is said to be moral is not good. This is a proposition. As outlined in Sympathy for the Devil, created by Mick Jagger, Just as every cop is a criminal and all the sinners saints. As heads is tails, my name is Lucifer, and I'm in need of some restraint. If you see me, have some courtesy, show some sympathy and some taste. Use all your well-learned politesse, for I lay your soul to waste. Tell me, babe, what's my name? Tell me, babe, what's my game? Oh! Put aside jaded cynicism. Imagine something akin to a pure cynicism, agnosticism, skepticism in suffering and in truth. Should we lean on tradition or the ages? And do they not, on their own, decouple from reality at a rapid pace? We are also familiar with the bitter pills of struggles for power and perversely convoluted, illegal ways of turning things upside down, drawing lines in the sand, twisting the arm, breaking the back to contain, control, petrify, and entrench vested interest to manage popular will. But let us move to a higher plane. The real plane we can aspire to, though we do not even touch it. Morality. Morality. To not have bad feelings about anyone. To not condemn. To not have bad feelings about anyone. To not condemn. What a tall order. Morality. And even when people do something which causes harm to ourselves or to others, it is our responsibility, were we to be Christian, were we to be divine, to deal with our emotions, our reactions, to not hate, to not condemn, to not elevate ourselves morally above someone else. The meek shall inherit the earth. As gospel has spoken, beware whom you might turn away from your door, whom you might insult, ignore, mistreat, derogate. Beware. It could be Jesus. Yet we practice, out of my way, do what we say so I can host Jesus. But do not beware because you want to be right. You want to be saved. Don't beware for those reasons. Beware because in your soul you you alone have found it true to beware on your own and just plain wrong to disrespect, insult, or disparage another human being. Forsake maligning and praying for the same soul all at once. Dig yourself. This is not the era of shame. Ronald Reagan would not buy it. Ollie North would not buy it. You can no longer lean on or exploit such effect in many quarters of our society. This is not the era of blame. The blame is what we are. The blame is what we do. We as much must struggle to not blame others as we struggle with personal guilt. This is, to some extent, the era of individual rights and individual responsibility. Every man has to carry her own moral weight. As a practical matter, in this time, there is literally no tapestry of human coexistence through which we can attach blame or apply shame. And we reject shame. Our angry children reject shame. Our angry children fail to appreciate that another person has prerogatives and that those prerogatives take precedence to one's self. Have we seen our children? This is not a time to use habits, histories, and the legacies of guilt and blame and punishment, because they are, whether you have the stamina to consider it or not, significantly out of step with technology, out of step with speed, and ever so out of step with images, models, and behaviors on television. Those contingencies bearing down on who we are. This is not a time to rely on philosophies of guilt and blame, because they are old and weary to the psyche. Not everything old is gold. But maybe, just maybe, it's not time to rely on philosophies of guilt and blame, because morally, this is our present position. This is our current situation. This is our present soul, our present anathema, a part of our present honest dilemma. Honest dilemma. And we are no better or worse than sinner or saint. But can we love? I would like to remind you to please remember animals. I was recently speaking with several researchers who continue to do animal research, and even though they do it kindly and do it within the guidelines set down by university care committees and the federal government, some very painful, lonely, horrific things are happening to animals. Animals feel pain. Animals suffer greatly in so many ways just by being alive and sentient. And were we to get nirvana or utopia tomorrow on the backs of doing so-called research on animals, we cannot do it. This is not right. This is not moral. This is not ethical. Animals feel pain, and they suffer as though you or I were to suffer, no matter the reason, and that is the critical point to pay attention to. So please remember the animals that are suffering so with tumors and cancer and AIDS and social experiments and every kind of impossibly terrifying. You know, it's been said that Christ suffered so much to die on the cross. Animals, as feeling living things, talking about the suffering of feeling, go through things that are the ultimate of what any feeling living thing could have to experience, whether it's done kindly or unkindly, legally or illegally. So please remember animals and fight for them. And I will have a slate as we leave the program for an organization or two which you may contact to be involved in these concerns. Finally, in closing, as we leave the air, I will take on one more question. Question of when does life begin? Do you believe in right to life? Well, that's quite a question to hit me with. When does life begin? I'm not sure we're in life now, or we've been in life before, or will be in life later, or will not be in life. I wouldn't know. Technically, I would think that life begins at conception, if you want to get technical, medical about it. However, what is this life, before it, after it, in the future, in the past? Not to favor any kind of philosophy about it, one could not say. And I know there could be all kinds of technical arguments about the development of a fetus and the stage at which it can be considered life. I will tell you that seeing video of late-stage fetuses and even earlier stage ones getting injected with something that causes them to die certainly shows a cringing and a refraction from pain or an event to avoid. I'm not very involved in the question of when life begins and right to life. I can see very much both sides of this issue. I can see why people would firmly believe that when a fetus is conceived or a child is conceived, you have a life, and killing is killing. On the other hand, I can imagine circumstances where people conceive not wantonly with disregard, but in terrible circumstances, which adds a whole host of other complicating factors. So I can understand both sides, but I cannot understand hateful attacks. If one is to believe in life, I cannot understand anything that's vicious or malicious or hateful. And again, I cannot be the judge and prosecutor of another human being. So So thank you once again. We are leaving now. We are saying good afternoon to you, April 98, from the Roxbury studio. Thanks to the crew, thanks to the viewers. Look forward to talking with you again. Good afternoon.